just a few words from here, and then I take my place there. Dr. Rajkumar, who I have had the privilege of knowing for a long time, but not really meeting that often. It's certainly a great honor to be here today. Dr. Sridhar Patnaik, Professor Kathleen Madrowski, and Professor Janani Banerjee. How shall I say? This event in the liberal arts and humanities is a very important event for us because we don't really get such a wonderful young audience, and that itself is something which we really treasure. So yes, Jindal University, what Professor Rajkumar said, this journey is something like when I heard about what you said, I thought about, when I was an undergraduate, I used to read a lot of romantic poets. So I remember this line from Keats, and then I felt like a watcher of the sky when a new planet swims into its ken. And this was something which was remarkable about Jindal University. I have to say that I'm sure everyone here, even though you may come from another part of the world, but the language, the music, the sentiment, I think just resonates with everyone. So there's a mixture of the two languages. Mostly the languages, the Sufiana Zaban. So I think occasionally we will also a little bit translate, but bear with us because it is this feeling resonance that we have with you which will ultimately be the success or not so successful end of this performance. Thank you very much. आपको गार्गी ने बताया, and I'm going to elaborate on this whole Abhinav Gupta philosophy, the literary theorist, contemporary era, 950. And Abhinav Gupta talked of SYEDA, in which you evoke a certain sensibility in the audience by tapping the 9 rasas. So when asked to deliver a commencement lecture, I thought that, this lot of talking, lot of words, but somewhere we have to strike that chord. So why not do it a different way? And that's when I invited my very dear friend, my younger colleague, RENE Singh. Why don't we go together to Jindal University and we do a different kind of a commencement? उनको याद तो रह जाएगा कि हमने क्या किया था.
अव्वले अल्लाह नूर उपाया कुदरत के सब बंदे एक नूर ते सब जग उपजा कौन भले कौन मंदे. From the one light welled up the universe. So who is good and who is bad? पूरब से सूर्य उगा फैला उजियारा जागी हर दिशा दिशा जागा जग सारा जागा जग सारा जागा, जग सारा।
Let's begin with a little glance at my life for what it is worth, I think, but still I want to share it with you. I was born in Kashmir. Kashmir, which evokes so many feelings, so many emotions in all of us. You know, I'm remembering one couplet of a poet whose name was Brij Narayan Chakbast. Mind you, a Hindu Pandit. We didn't know whether he was Hindu or Muslim. It didn't really matter at that time. And he said this about Kashmir. चप्पा चप्पा है मेरे कश्मीर का मेहमान नवाज, ब्रिज नारायण चकबस्त. चप्पा चप्पा है मेरे कश्मीर का मेहमान नवाज. Every bit of my Kashmir welcomes the visitors. चप्पा चप्पा है मेरे कश्मीर का मेहमान नवाज, रास्ते के पत्थरों ने भी दिया पानी मुझे. जो when the Lidder river flows, it's stones, and stones yield water. So this was that's something I wanted to share with you. Okay, so Kashmir, then came school, Delhi, going to one of the great public schools where I learnt all my initial lessons on this whole concept of Ganga Jamuni. The title of our presentation is Lifetimes and Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb. And I got this from Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb from my home. And by the way, this is Sonipat, but I'm from Panipat, so I'm your neighbor. For 800 years we lived in Panipat. At the time of partition, my entire 99% of my family was perforce piled into trucks and sent across the border. But Panipat is, chappa chappa Panipat ka hamare khoon mein hai. So anyway, then came school, college in Delhi. Of course, beautiful educational institutions. Ours was very beautiful. That's what, we enjoyed it, we were young, it was exciting. Then on to United States, a university in the United States, University of Wisconsin. For many family reasons, had to give up and go to another university, the University of Hawaii, which despite the fact of Diamond Head and Waikiki and all of that, Hawaii was a very strict university. So from there, little bit of teaching in LSR College in Delhi, and then on to Canada, and then on to a PhD. So that was the graph of my, my growing up, my career, my education. And then returned to India. Returned to India many years ago, and everyone predicted that won't last, she's gone there, but she'll come back. Anyway, so 40 years later, and I'm still here. And then started a whole series of events which has led us and which has directed us towards maybe devoting a lot of our, whatever remainder of my life, and most of RENE has a lot of life ahead of her, to this whole concept of Ganga Jamuni, which we would like to transmit to you through सहृदयता. And that is, जब ऐसा कहते हैं कि शेर फहमी के लिए ज़रूरी है कि सहृदयता का असर जो है वो सब पे उसका असर हो. That is kind of a resonance. And this idea, Amir Khusro, the iconic Sufi philosopher, poet, so many ways I can describe him, he got this idea from Abhinav Gupta. So this concept we wanted to, this is why we have, where we imbibe our idea from, and why this lecture has become a sort of has taken on a different mold. So back here, and then what happens? Babri happens. What happens? Gujarat 2002 happens. What happens? 2022 Bilqis Bano happens. So all of that, you are all very well aware of the mahal in which we are living and breathing. So all of these things, then that became so central and important in my life that that is what sort of has blended into this commencement lecture, in which we take you to us and we take ourselves to you. And if अगर सहृदयता से हमारा दिल धड़कता है, तो यही हमारी उपलब्धि है. This is what we are trying to. This is the result of what we are trying to do. So that's my life, and now Rene's life.
So I was born into a Sikh household. I would wake up to the verses of Gurbani, which has the verses of Baba Farid to Kabir, from Persian to Sanskrit to Punjabi to Gurmukhi. I went to a school in the heart of old town of Delhi, Chandni Chowk, where I was surrounded by a mosque on one side, the Jain temple on one side, the oldest church in Delhi, which was within my school, and we could see from our classrooms the Red Fort. We didn't know who we were, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh. We just knew that we had to enjoy every festival, be a part of everything around us, the food, the clothes, the music, and everything else. So this is how I grew up. And also, my family was from the pre-partition India, Pakistan, Peshawar and Rawalpindi. And my father was a part of the Khudai Khidmatgar. I wonder how many of you people know who they are. They were known as the frontier Gandhis. They were the Pathans. You know how Pathans are. They have the fighter instinct, but they took to the Gandhian philosophy and imbibed the Gandhian philosophy, and they became the Gandhis, the frontier Gandhis. Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan was the frontier Gandhi. People who are from Delhi over here would know there's a Ghaffar market and a Khan market, which everybody would know, I'm sure, named after them. So this was the mahol I grew up in, and this is who we are. And we hope to take this culture forward. Multiculture, Ganga, Jamuni, Tehzeeb.
So, Khudai Khidmatgar, Badshah Khan, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, a Sikh family, part of that, part of this cultural, beautiful concept of the cultural mosaic. This is what we treasure, and this is what became for us the main thesis of what we'll try to project, and we'll try to explain, and we'll try to share with you this whole concept of Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb. And this Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb is the richness of this Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb. I don't have to tell you that it's a rich culture. It's something that you understand yourself. And it's this richness of culture, of language, of practices, of events, of celebrations, which is, what really makes this country so unique. Yani, there are millions, there are thousands of flowers blooming of different colors. Like Dr. Allama Iqbal said, "Phool hain sehra mein ya pariyan qatar andar qatar. Ude ude, neele neele, peele peele perahan." These flowers in the garden, like it seemed like there are fairies in a row. Koi udi hai, koi neeli hai, koi peeli hai. And the homogenization of all this, takes away. So that is the. So now we'll move on. We'll keep moving because we are also conscious of the time. So RENE will present something which is, to me, it is one of the most important statements of the medley of South Asia, of language and of religion. Here is a qawwal from Pakistan. His name is Farid Ayaz, and he sings with his brother Abu Muhammad, and he is singing in the South Asian context, religion. He is praying to the Hindu gods, and this is something which resonates everywhere, from the Lahore and the Karachi and the Islamabad that I remember, and I have not gone back there for several years. And this is something which will be our first example of this Ganga Jamuni. RENE.
So Farid Ayaz Bhai, when he came to India, he was invited to the Kabir Yatra. And these are the words which he resonated. And he probably has so many followers after that. कन्हैया याद है कुछ भी हमारी, कन्हैया याद है कुछ भी हमारी, कहूँ क्या तेरे भूलने पे मैं वारी, कहूँ क्या तेरे भूलने पे मैं वारी, कन्हैया याद है कुछ भी हमारी, बेनती मैं कर कर, बेनती मैं कर कर बमना से पूछी, बेनती मैं कर कर बमना से पूछी.
Bamana means Brahmin.
पल पल की खबर तिहारी, कन्हैया याद है कुछ भी हमारी, पैया परी पैया परी महादेव के जाकर, पैया परी महादेव के जाकर, टोना भी कर मैं हारी, टोना भी करके मैं हारी हारी, कन्हैया याद है कुछ भी हमारी, कन्हैया याद है कुछ भी हमारी. And now he switches. मेरा हाथ देख बराहमन, मेरा हाथ देख बराहमन, ये बता, मेरा हाथ देख बराहमन, ये बता कि यार मिलेगा कब, कि यार मिलेगा कब, मेरा हाथ देख बराहमन, ये बता कि यार मिलेगा कब, तेरे मुंह से खुदा करे, तेरे मुंह से निकले खुदा करे, तेरे मुंह से निकले खुदा करे, इसी साल इसी माह में, इसी साल इसी माह में, तेरे मुंह से निकले खुदा करे, मेरा यार मिलेगा कब, इसी साल में इसी माह में, इसी साल में इसी माह में, कन्हैया कन्हैया याद है कुछ भी हमारी, याद है कुछ भी हमारी, याद है कुछ भी हमारी।
फिर जिंदगी आगे दौड़ी, आगे चली, and I became part of two of the most important formations, statutory bodies of this country, the National Commission for Women and the Planning Commission. The highest decision making as far as planning is concerned, and the statutory body under an act of parliament, the National Commission for Women. But in all these positions, I have always thought of myself as an activist. When I was a member of NCW, we were like fire engines rushing. My very first case was again in Haryana, in New district in a place called Sudaka. And I remember there was a case of an honor, ultimately it resulted in an honor killing. But at that time we managed to rescue the girl. And when we went to this place in Haryana, in the New district, in a place called Sudaka, they were all Muslims. And they believed in Gotr and caste, you know, all of these. And I was so shocked. I said, there is nothing like Gotr and caste, and this doesn't exist in Islam. And I know my Islam. And it was my colleague, Dr. Padma Seth, who was the daughter of the first speaker of the Lok Sabha in independent India, Ananta Sainam Iyengar. She stood there and said, do you understand Islam? And all these villagers were milling around. I remember that because I'm here in Sonipat and I'm thinking of, you know, Haryana. So I'm just saying that it crossed. I didn't have to speak for Islam. Dr. Padma Seth, who was a lawyer, she spoke for Islam. So everywhere that I went not as a Muslim woman, just as a woman, as a person who was integral to every section of the society. I went in my very inexpensive, very cheap cotton saris all over the country. And I've just written it down because I sometimes, you know, like for example, the length and breadth of India across caste, class, religion, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, Dalits, Musahars, Chai Bagans, Naga mothers, association of disappeared persons in Kashmir, everywhere I went, in the northeast, in Imphal, in Mizoram, wherever, and in Andaman and Nicobar, in Lakshadweep, some areas were predominantly Muslim, but that consciousness was just not there. If it was violence against women, I was there. If it was anything to do with, you know, hunger, starvation, any kind of deprivation, that it didn't really matter who it was. Could have been a Musahar in a Dalit Basti, in Kusheshwar Sthan in Darbhanga district, that was mine. It could be in Bolangir, in Kalahandi, it could be in Koraput, wherever. So the operating part was that जहाँ जुल्म है वहाँ हम हैं, चाहे हम development में हों, चाहे हम महिलाओं के लिए हों, wherever there is any kind of physical, mental, emotional violence, you know, maybe I completely sort of went overboard, but I was surrounded by all the most eminent economists, and I was the person who was always, you know, the activist. I was always the activist. Un logon mein se thi main. So that was very fulfilling part of my life, and many years, 10 years in the Planning Commission, 3 years in the NCW. So my country is like that. My country is sometimes बहार का मौसम होता है, कभी खिज़ा का मौसम होता है, कभी जाड़ा होता है, कभी पत्ते गिरते हैं, कभी पतझड़ होती है, कभी बहार आती है. It's a country of spring, autumn, winter, all kinds. That is my country. And that is beautifully expressed, which only RENE can do.
Faiz Saab says, जर्द पत्तों का बंजो मेरा देश है, जर्द पत्तों का बंजो मेरा देश है, दर्द की अंजुमन जो मेरा देश है, दर्द की अंजुमन जो मेरा देश है, पोस्टमैनों के नाम, तांगे वालों के नाम, रेलबानों के नाम, कारखानों के भूखे जियालों के नाम, कारखानों के भूखे जियालों के नाम, जर्द पत्तों का बंजो मेरा देश है, दर्द की अंजुमन जो मेरा देश है, जो मेरा देश है, जो मेरा देश है. So this is our country. दर्द भी है, बहार भी है, खिज़ा भी है. As SYEDA Appa said, I have a similar story traveling our country with music. I have worked with young girls, orphans, widows, traveling from Kashmir to Kanyakumari with music. The interesting part has been, I always saw hope. Wherever there was this feeling of low, I always saw hope with my music. So we made musical stories of their lives, and brought it out on community radios. So eventually, it gave them voice, expression, empowerment, and there they were, getting ready to deal with life.
So our life's trajectory then, as RENE has so expressed it so beautifully, where all of this despair, and yet we always tried to find hope. For the last 30 years, Association of Parents of Disappeared Persons in Kashmir, for the last 30 years they've sat in a certain small park in Srinagar to protest against. They don't know if they are dead, they don't know if they are in prison, they don't know anything. And that trauma, that tragedy, and yet generation after generation brings that hope. So in this context, I want to recall one of our engagements, our common engagements, is that there was a man whose name was Khwaja Ahmad Abbas. He wrote a column for Blitz, non-stop for 47 years, weekly column for Blitz called Last Page. And that time the story was that people used to buy the Blitz and start reading it from the last page. The column was called Last Page. So in his memory and his principles, we started this trust. And when we talk about the trajectory of our lives, I think of a film he made, in which, of course, everyone would know that was the first film he introduced Amitabh Bachchan. And Amitabh Bachchan remembers it with a lot of love, and he still calls him Mamu Jaan. He always calls him Mamu Jaan, even today. And this book that Soni Chandi Ke Butt that Gargi talked about is his stories, which Amitabh Bachchan is now, today or tomorrow, he's going to tweet about it or do something about it. In any event, the reason I'm saying it, this film Saath Hindustani was about the liberation of Goa. And in this, there is one nazm or a poem of Kaifi Azmi Sahab. Kaifi Azmi Sahab, who talks about a kind of a hope of a community, a hope of a people that refuse to give up because of the despair that surrounds them. यूं बढ़ो जैसे लहरा के धारा बढ़े, ठोकरे खाओ के दिल हमारा बढ़े. This song sung by Amitabh Bachchan in his very first film with a group of other Hindustanis, because there are 7 Hindustani, 6 men and 1 girl. So that was the film, and RENE will just present it to you to give you that hope of togetherness. If we are together, there is hope. If we do not stick together, then everything is lost.
So you are all embarking on a new journey. So let's all be a part of this hope and take this hope forward. And do clap along, sing along if you can. यूं बढ़ो जैसे लहरा के धारा बढ़े, ठोकरे खाओ तो दिल हमारा बढ़े. यूं बढ़ो जैसे लहरा के धारा बढ़े, ठोकरे खाओ तो दिल हमारा बढ़े. यूं बढ़ो इस तरह जम के तूफान में रखो कदम, के कदम चूमने को किनारा बढ़े. इस तरह जम के तूफान में रखो कदम, के कदम चूमने को किनारा बढ़े. यूं बढ़ो जैसे लहरा के धारा बढ़े, ठोकरे खाओ तो दिल हमारा बढ़े. यूं बढ़ो एक तरफ मौत है, एक तरफ जिंदगी, बीच से ले चलो कारवां साथियों. एक तरफ मौत है, एक तरफ जिंदगी, बीच से ले चलो कारवां साथियों. हर तरफ दुश्मनी का अंधेरा भी है, हर कदम पे गरीबी का डेरा भी है. सिर्फ रातें हमारी नहीं है सिया, धुंधला धुंधला हमारा सवेरा भी है. यूं बढ़ो जैसे लहरा के धारा बढ़े, ठोकरे खाओ तो दिल हमारा बढ़े. एक दिल है मचलते हैं अरमां कई दिल, मगर एक है दिल की धड़कन भी एक दिल में मचलते हैं अरमां कई, एक दिल है और दिल की धड़कन भी एक. अपना गुलशन भी एक, अपना सहरा भी एक, अपने कांटे भी एक, अपना दामन भी एक. अपना गुलशन भी एक, अपना सहरा भी एक, अपने कांटे भी एक, अपना दामन भी एक. एकता इस मोहब्बत से दुनिया को आवाज दो, बीच से ले चलो कारवां साथियों. इस मोहब्बत से, इस मोहब्बत से, इस मोहब्बत से, इस मोहब्बत से दुनिया को आवाज दो. ले चलो साथ सारा जहां साथियों. I want you all to repeat this with me, okay? इस मोहब्बत से दुनिया को आवाज दो, ले चलो साथ सारा जहां साथियों. इस मोहब्बत से आवाज दो, ले चलो साथ सारा जहां साथियों. ले चलो साथ सारा जहां साथियों. ले चलो साथ सारा जहां साथियों. Thank you.
तो कैफी साहब ने कहा कि सिर्फ रातें हमारी नहीं हैं सिया, धुंधला धुंधला हमारा सवेरा भी है. सो द मॉर्निंग इज़ ऑल्सो डॉनिंग. और इस पे हम अगर इसी गंगा जमनी पे चलें तो this concept has kept us on the path, and now we travel back to the 12th century to the iconic Hazrat Amir Khusro, who was the Bani of the Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb. Amir Khusro, who spoke and he wrote in a feminist voice. मैं तो खड़ी थी आस लगाए, मेहंदी कजरा मांग सजाए. मैं तो खड़ी थी आस लगाए, मेहंदी कजरा मांग सजाए. RENE will sing this bandish of Hazrat Amir Khusro, but to personify as a woman. This itself is something which we are the two main pillars of today's commencement lecture is gender and Ganga Jamuni. So isi baat ko jo Amir Khusro, and then we'll unfold Amir Khusro a little bit in front of you, and we will take you to the Farsi and the Urdu. And I want you to remember that if you only deconstruct the words, you will understand the Farsi. It is not so difficult. So, it's just the Sehridita is going on. So I'll ask RENE to render this small bandish of Amir Khusro, and then we'll carry on.
Shringar, love for the one above and oneness and celebration. मैं तो खड़ी थी आस लगाए, मेहंदी कजरा मांग सजाए. देख सुरतिया अपने पिया की, अपने पिया की, अपने पिया की, अपने पिया की, अपने पिया की. हार गई मैं तो तन मन को, हार गई मैं तो तन मन को. एरी सखी मोरे पिया घर आए, एरी सखी मोरे पिया घर आए. भाग लगे इस आंगन को, भाग लगे इस आंगन को. एरी सखी मोरे पिया घर आए, पिया घर आए, पिया घर आए, पिया घर आए, पिया घर आए. एरी सखी मोरे पिया घर आए. He also spoke of the seasons and the pain in the seasons. जिस सावन में पिया घर नाही, जिस सावन में पिया घर माहे, उस सावन की रैन सुहानी. जिस सावन में पिया घर नाही, जिस सावन में पिया घर नाही, पिया घर नाही, पिया घर नाही, पिया घर नाही. आग सखे मोरे पिया घर आए, मोरे पिया घर आए, मोरे पिया घर आए, मोरे सैया घर आए, मोरे खाजा घर आए, पिया घर आए, मोरे पिया घर आए, मोरे पिया घर आए, मोरे सैया घर आए।
अब हमारा समय अब कम रह गया है, तो हम आपको we want to give you a little taste also when we talk of Ganga Jamuni. We want to give you a little taste of the Farsi kalam, Farsi, Hindvi, Khadi Boli, how this is blended together, and a very short, we want to give you a short example of that. कि कैसे अमीर खुसरो, and all this, now we are listening to Hazrat Amir Khusro, and you know that when he says मेरे पिया घर आए, in the same breath he says मेरे ख्वाजा घर आए, because वही हजरत निज़ामुद्दीन के वो भक्त थे, उनके मुरीद थे, और आखिर में वहीं he fell down on his हजरत निज़ामुद्दीन के कब्र पे उनका वो लेटे और उनके ख़त्म हो गए. So that is the whole sentiment of हज़रत अमीर खुसरो, और उसी में ये फ़ारसी और हिंदवी, just an example of that, because losing this, again I keep saying this, losing this mosaic is going to be a great deprivation. For example, RENE will express this, but for example he says, ज़ेहाल मिस्की मकुन तगाफुल दुराए नैना बनाए बतियाँ. ज़ेहाल मिस्की फ़ारसी, मकुन तगाफुल फ़ारसी, दुराए नैना बनाए बतियाँ हिंदवी, हिंदी. RENE.
ज़िहाल मिस्की मकुन तगाफुल दुराए नैना बनाए पतिया. किताब हिजरा नादार मैं जान, नाले हूँ काहे लगाए छतिया.
यानी मुझ गरीब का हाल, मुझ मिस्कीन का हाल, ज़ेहाल मिस्की मकुन तगाफुल, don't be negligent and don't be forgetful, मेरा कितना बुरा हाल है. ज़ेहाल मिस्की मकुन तगाफुल दुराए नैना बनाए बतियाँ, आँखें भी चुरा रहा है, बातें भी बना रहा है. So this juxtaposition of the language, and one more and then we'll carry on.
चूशम में सोजा चूज़र्रा हैरान, चूशम में सोजा चूज़र्रा हैरान, हमेशा गिरिया बाइश के आम सखी पिया को जो मैं ना देखूं तो कैसे काटूं अंधेरी रतियां.
चू शम्मा सोजा, मैं शमा की तरह जल रहा हूँ. शमा everyone understand, सोज means जलना. चू शम्मा सोजा, चू जर्रा हैरान, छोटे छोटे little particles, हैरान हूँ, I'm like bewildered like the small particles. सखी पिया को जो मैंने देखूं तो कैसे काटूं अंधेरी रतियां. So this is the juxtaposition of Hazrat Amir Khusro with Hindvi kalam, Hindi, Hindvi, Khadi and Farsi. So that's one more example. And just to carry this on, we have to sort of bring it to the present. And I want to remind you that backtracking a little bit. हम लोग, we grew up on a diet of dastans and paheliyan. Dastane, paheliyan, we used to hear the story of Nargis Pari from our grandmother. We heard the story of Hatim Tai from Nani, Dadi, the story of those. That was the diet on which we grew up. And the other thing was that poets came in and out of our house. We didn't know that a man called Firaq Gorakhpuri, his name was Raghubir Sahai Firaq Gorakhpuri. We didn't know. We didn't know that a man called Mulla, एक शायर जिनका नाम मुल्ला था, हमें नहीं पता था कि उनका नाम, his name was Anand Narayan Mulla. We didn't know that a man called Chakbast was Brij Narayan Chakbast. Whether they were Hindus or Muslims, it was absolutely of no interest or consequence. They were just poets who came through the house, who recited and went out of the door. And I remember that when Faiz Sahab had come to our house, and like Faiz Sahab and all his indulgences in every way, I have some very, very fond and lovely memories of him. These were daily things that were happening. And in a parallel way, the same thing was going on in your house.
So, I would just take it forward. My father would regularly recite Ghalib for my mother, this couplet which I'm going to recite for you. जाने तुम पर निसार करता हूँ, जाने तुम पर निसार करता हूँ, ये नहीं जानता दुआ क्या है, दिल नादां तुझे हुआ क्या है, आखिर इस दर्द की दवा क्या है.
तो जब वो, when he said to his wife that I love you and my life is nisar on you, I don't know what it is to pray before God. Ghalib said it to his beloved, and her father said it to her mother. Yeah. So I'm not saying that we should talk in poetic language, but like all those emojis and all of that. I think we have another world is opening out. And so I was going to talk about monuments, and very briefly then, we saw monuments as monuments. We never thought that this was a Hindu monument, this was a Muslim monument. And today, the monuments have got labels. There's from Babri, we started, Gyan Vapi, Mathura Masjid, Shamsi Masjid, Budaiyon. All of these masjids have now become different entities, this Eidgah, that Eidgah, this prayer, that prayer. All of that was, something which now it is part of the architecture of our daily lives. So I still remember, and now we are almost drawing to a conclusion, I still remember hearing this, because I was maybe just born, or I can't, maybe 1 year or something. In 1947, Maulana Azad stood on the stairs of Jamia Masjid ki siriyon pe. He made this immensely classic speech. He was twice the Congress president, in 1923 and 1940. And he made the speech in which he said to the Muslims of Delhi were terrified. The riots were raging. They were all sort of thinking, exodus kare, kahan jaye, yahan wahan. And he made this speech and he said, it is your religious duty to join hands with your Hindu, us zamane mein brethren bolte the, so I can't say brothers and sisters. So he said, it is your religious duty to join hands with your Hindu brethren and fight against a common enemy. You are scared, you are leaving this country. Remember that it was your forefathers who came and performed wuzu on the banks of the Jamna. So these were the classic moments of remembrance, where all these monuments became, historical landmarks in this whole tapestry of the country. So this was my, lead into the last part of our presentation, which is Shah Jahan Abad.
So let's take a walk into Shah Jahanabad. We have students here from all over the country, but Delhi also was a center of Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb in the 18th and the 19th century. As they say, देखो निगाहे नाज से, देखो निगाहे नाज से दिल्ली के नज़ारे, देखो निगाहे नाज से दिल्ली के नज़ारे, तहज़ीब की जन्नत है ये जमुना के किनारे, तहज़ीब की जन्नत है ये जमुना के किनारे.
और मीर तकी मीर क्या कहते हैं? वो कहते हैं दिल्ली के नहीं कूचे, कूचे कहते हैं कूचा गलियाँ, यू नो, लेन्स एंड बाई लेन्स. दिल्ली के नहीं कूचे औराक़े मुसव्विर हैं. वरक is pages and musawwir is artist. These are not these are not lanes and by lanes of Delhi. These are pages of an artist's scrapbook. दिल्ली के नहीं कूचे औराक़े मुसव्विर हैं, जो शक्ल नज़र आई तस्वीर नज़र आई. Every face that you saw walking in through Delhi was like a portrait of an artist.
Wow, nice.
दिल्ली के नहीं कूचे औराक़े मुसव्विर हैं. आपके वोकैबुलरी में कूचा आ गया, औराक़ आ गया, मुसव्विर आ गया. जो शक्ल नज़र आई तस्वीर नज़र आई. मीर तकी मीर अबाउट दिल्ली के बारे में. So
this piece actually Shahjahanabad calls for a separate program. We'll come back for that. पर आपको सिर्फ थोड़ी सी झलक दिखा रहे हैं. तो फिर
फूल वालों की साइड.
So बादशाह सलामत थोड़ा सा.
अच्छा चलिए. बहादुर शाह जफर.
She's cutting it short.
The last, I don't want anyone to get up, and because we're almost at the end and I just love having you all here. We both love it. So बहादुर शाह जफर, जिनको फिर बर्मा भेज दिया गया, रंगून में उनकी कब्र है. बहादुर शाह जफर अब उठते हैं शाहजहां आबाद में, और सुबह उठते हैं. कैसे उठते हैं? भैरवी की तान से. भैरवी की तान से. थोड़ा सा एक भैरवी का एक टुकड़ा कर दो.
जागो जगो जियारा छाए, किरणों की रानी गाए, जागो रे मेरे मन मोहन प्यारे.
तो बादशाह सलामत उठ रहे हैं. रूमाल खाने वालियां रूमाल ला रही हैं. There's a whole department of handkerchiefs. रूमाल कहते हैं handkerchiefs को. रूमाल खाने वालियां रूमाल ला रही हैं शाही नाक पोंछने के लिए, to blow the royal nose. Anyway, there's a whole lot that will unfold, but the operative part of this piece of narration is Phool Walon Ki Sair. And RENE will tell you a little bit about Phool Walon Ki Sair, and then we'll just go directly into it.
Yeah. So Phool Walon Ki Sair is seen as a true example of the composite culture of Delhi and the Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb. It is one of the festivals which is also celebrated today for celebrating our Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb, our composite culture, and celebration of harmony and peace. I would like to know how many of you know about it. Does anybody over here? Of course. So, very briefly, I would just like to tell you that this celebration was made for 3 days. The procession started from Chandni Chowk with phoolon ki chadar and phoolon ke pankhe, which is now they are made as phoolon ka pankhas. For 3 days, they had to travel from Chandni Chowk to Mehroli, a distance of 32 kilometers. And during that festival of 3 days, there were many sarais, many stoppings, where there were kavalis, bhajans, songs, all kind of tamasha beans. They would be celebrating beautifully for 3 days. And finally, they would put the chadar on the Bakhtiyar Kaki, a Sufi saint of the 13th century, his shrine, and then go on to Jog Maya's Mandir of Jog Maya Devi, and put a chadar there and sing bhajans. So just a jhalak of a small bhajan. And this festival today was revived, in fact, in 1962 by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and then later on by many prime ministers, and these pankhas and chaddars are presented to them, and now the Chief Minister of Delhi. So it's a good thing that it continues, but इसकी रूह थोड़ी थोड़ी missing है. तो I would expect and hope the youth will bring it all together back and create the same magic which was there. So little झलक of a, in जोगमाई मंदिर भजन चल रहा है, वो सीन देखिए, सेलिब्रेशन चल रही है
और बादशाह सलामत उस पे प्रिजाइड कर रहे हैं.
हम फिर वापस जा रहे हैं. रंग दे रंग दे रंग दे चुनरिया चुनरिया रंग दे रंग दे रंग दे रंग दे कान्हा के रंग में रंग दे रंग दे मेरे कान्हा के रंग में रंग दे 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 धानी चुनरिया मोरे कान्हा को ना भावे धानी चुनरिया मोरे कान्हा को ना भावे पीली रंग दीनी सब रंग रंग दी चुनरिया रंग दे 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 रंग दे. राग बाण था, आपको देख के याद आया, पहले मैं भूल गई आपको. He wanted to know every piece which rag it was composed on. तो अभी मुझे उनकी शक्ल उनको देखा तो याद आया. शुक्रिया.
तो अब जोग माया का मंदिर, and this is the last part of our presentation, and we again come back to maybe today, maybe the context of the present. Again, the whole concept of gender. हम देखते हैं कि I started off when I went back to my memory, Gujarat 2002. I remember Bilqis Bano. I remember how she ran from Limkheda, how she ran with 17 members of her family, 14 of whom were killed, including her small child. And all that happened. I don't necessarily want to narrate those details that everybody knows, it's imbibed in us. So we have Nirbhaya, we have Bilqis Bano, we have Hathras Ki Bachchi. Those are the realities that are, they are traumas within our system. But from this very soil where you are sitting today, Sonipat, from Panipat, there was a poet who was the first feminist poet of this country, who wrote in 1905 about the dignity of women. It's this dharti that gave birth to this man who spoke for women, who spoke for many things. He was a religious reformer. He spoke against all the malinformation and the crudities that had entered into this whole Islamic rubric. His name was Maulana Altaf Hussain Hali, and nobody could question him. So we want to end with Maulana Altaf Hussain Hali, who wrote this in 1905.
ए माओ बहनों बेटियों, ए माओ बहनों बेटियों, दुनिया की जीनत तुमसे है. ए माओ बहनों बेटियों, दुनिया की जीनत तुमसे है. मुल्कों की बस्ती हो तुम्ही, मुल्कों की बस्ती हो तुम्ही, कौमों की इज्जत तुमसे है, कौमों की इज्जत तुमसे है, ए माओ बहनों बेटियों।
तुम घर की हो शहजादियाँ, शहजादी का मतलब होता है प्रिंसेस। तुम घर की हो शहजादियाँ, मुल्कों की हो आबादियाँ, यू पॉपुलेट द नेशंस। तुम घर की हो शहजादियाँ, मुल्कों की हो आबादियाँ, गमगीन दिलों की शादियाँ। शादियाँ मीन्स हैप्पीनेस, इन पेन यू ब्रिंग हैप्पीनेस। तुम घर की हो शहजादियाँ, मुल्कों की हो आबादियाँ, गमगीन दिलों की शादियाँ, दुख सुख में राहत तुमसे है, दुख सुख में राहत तुमसे है।
तुम आस हो बीमार की, तुम आस हो बीमार की, दारस हो तुम बेकार की, द अनएम्प्लॉयड।
ढारस, consolation. The word dharas means consolation. Please.
तुम आस हो बीमार की, ढारस हो तुम बेकार की, दौलत हो तुम नादार की, दौलत हो तुम नादार की, असरत में इशरत तुमसे है, असरत में इशरत तुमसे है।
दौलत हो तुम नादार की, the one who doesn't have a penny, तुम उसकी दौलत हो, उसरत में इशरत तुमसे है। उसरत and इशरत are antonyms. उसरत गरीबी, इशरत अमीरी। So फिर ये मतलब ये कि दौलत हो तुम नादार की, उसरत में इशरत तुमसे है,
ए माओ बहनों बेटियों,
दुनिया की जीनत तुमसे है, मुल्कों की बस्ती हो तुम्ही, कौमों की इज्जत तुमसे है। रेनी।
काबे में कोई ढूंढे, काशी में कोई जाए, संसार कुल को पूजे, कुल को जगत सराहे, सैया सैया, मैं अपने पी के पैया परूं ना काहे, हर कौम रास्त राहे, दीने वकिब लगाहे, हर कौम रास्त राहे, दीने वकिब लगाहे। हर कौम का एक ही रास्ता है और एक ही मंजिल। थैंक यू।
थैंक यू।